Lekutei Sichos Chelek Chav Zayin Sicha for Chag HaPesach. V'ilei Nishmas Rabbi Yosef ben Yamin ben Rabbi Menashe Kaltman. We are also learning the Schus, our dear friend Yester Shleima ben Risha, for a Refuah Shleima Ukreiva. Today we're going to discuss a Rambam about the Kos Chamishi. You might be familiar with the Kos Eliyahu, and it might sound something very similar, something that the Gemara discusses, a fifth Kos at the Seder. And we're actually going to explore later on, after learning what is this Kos Chamishi all about. Is it the Kos Shel Eliyahu that we are accustomed to or not? There is also a very beautiful lesson to be learned from the Kos Chamishi and the Kos Shel Eliyahu about the power of the faith in Mashiach and the coming of Mashiach. But let us begin. In the Rambam of Hilchas Chametz U'Matzah, where the Rambam discusses the various different mitzvahs that are done on the night of the Seder. When we get to the end of, in the Rambam, after he tells us the order of all the mitzvahs that are done, Nochin Kos Revi, after the fourth Kos, Zog the Rambam says like this: a person should pour a fifth Kos, fifth cup, and to recite over this Kos the Halal HaGadol, the great Halal. What is the Halal HaGadol? V'u'mehaydu l'Hashem ki toiv ad al naris bavel, from Kapitel Kuf Lamed Vav until Kuf Lamed Tes in Tehillim. The Kos ze'einei chayva, the Rambam concludes that this Kos is not an obligation, k'mei arba'a Kos, like the other four. It's something, it's not on the same level, as we will discuss what does the Rambam mean with this statement. Now, the Mokar of Kos Chamishi is in Braisa l'Digirsas HaGoinu. The source for this whole concept that there's a fifth cup is in a brisa that is, according to the girsa of the Gaonim, reads as follows: Chamishi Omer Alav Halal HaGadol Divrei Reb Tarfon. Reb Tarfon holds that there's a fifth kos over which one recites the Halal HaGadol. The question is, what is the Rambam's opinion as to what is the definition or the requirement or the obligation of this fifth kos? In other words, we see a brisa, Reb Tarfon says that this is an obligation. The Rambam talks about it. What does the Rambam say? So the Rabbeinu Maneach writes on the Rambam. From this statement of the Rambam, we understand that one is not allowed to drink wine after the four cases. If you're allowed to drink wine after the four cases, why are we requiring him to say halal over this case? Let him just drink a case. From here we learn that a person should not drink wine after the four cases. But if a person wants to drink, so a person should recite over this fifth cup something similar to what was recited over the fourth cup, on the topic of halal, of praising Hashem, on the topic of Yitzias Mitzrayim. But if not for that, you would not be allowed to drink. You would not be allowed to drink wine. When Divrei Rabbeinu Maneach is verstandig, as I learned Divrei Rambam as the Kos Chamishi is an inyan von Rishus. So the Rabbeinu Maneach is understanding that the Rambam holds that the fifth cup is totally an optional thing. He's allowed to pour. If he wants to drink, then he shouldn't just drink stamazay. He should say, he should recite Halal HaGadol over this fifth cup. This would be consistent with the opinion of some of the Gaonim, that the fifth cup is totally optional. The person could choose what he wants to do. But the Pirush is l'cheren nidgating in Lashon Rambam. So the Rebbe, this explanation of the Rambam, it does not fit well into the words of the Rambam. For in the Rambam is Messiah Canal, the Rambam says this cup, this fifth cup, is not an obligation in the same way as the other four cups. Now, if we're going to say, like the Rabbeinu Manoach, that the fifth cup is not a chayv at all, not obligatory at all, the Rambam could have just said concisely, this cup is not an obligation. The way the Rambam writes it, that this is not a chayva, not an obligation like the others, implies that there is some level of obligation here. So none of us says, it's just it's not as obligatory as the other four. And it's not as much an obligation as the other four. So therefore, that's the implication of the Rambam. So to say that the Rambam holds that this cup is totally a rishos is difficult to understand in the words of the Rambam. There is a similar opinion in the Ran in Pesachim, which writes as follows: the Daled Kaiv is Chayva v'chamish rishos. That the four kaises are an obligation. The fifth is not. If he wants to lishtes, and if he wants to drink, he could say halal gadol, and he could have a drink. Inami. Now that Ram brings another approach, the mitzvah minam muvchar lishtes kais chamishi. That this is actually not just it's not just the shus. It's mitzvah minam muvchar. It actually is an improvement of the mitzvah. You have a mitzvah to drink 4 kaises. You want to do this mitzvah in a better way, drink a 5th kais and say halal gadol. That's what he means, that you say on it halal gadol, you're enhancing the mitzvah with halal gadol. And this is where the words of the Rambam lean. In other words, the Ran is understanding in the Rambam that it is not rishus, totally rishus. It's a mitzvah min hamuvchar. That's why the Rambam says this cup is not the same kind of obligation as the other 4. Even though he should do it, not he's allowed to do it. As we said before, he can, he may. Here we're saying he should. But it's not the same level of obligation as mitzvah min hamuvchar. So you could fulfill the mitzvah properly without it. You want to do the mitzvah better, you can add a 5th kais. So this is how the Ran understands the Rambam, that a person should do the 5th kais as it enhances the mitzvah of arba kaises. This Pirush doesn't either fit well into the words of the Rambam. Because if that was the case, the Rambam would have written it clearly, as he does in other places, that it's a mitzvah min hamuvchar. For Lashna Rambam, but the Rambam's words, he doesn't say mitzvah min hamuvchar. He says einay chayva k'may arba kaises. From the words of the Rambam, it is implied as a sistakeda in demachiv that there is an obligation, or besnit mitzvah al kopanim min hamuvchar, but it's not an actual mitzvah, not even a mitzvah min hamuvchar. When the fires of the Rambam, yeshli limbs, like he should do it, it's the right thing to do, but it's not a mitzvah, not even mitzvah min hamuvchar. That is the implication of the words of the Rambam, where he doesn't say the words mitzvah min hamuvchar. He says v'yeshli limzeg and v'kaiza einay chayva k'mei arba kaises. So we have to understand what is the opinion of the Rambam. The opinion of the Rambam is not like Rabbi Manoach, that it's the shus because the Rambam says einay chayva k'mei arba kaises. It's not like the way the Ran understands that it's a mitzvah min hamuvchar because the Rambam doesn't say the words mitzvah min hamuvchar, which he would have because he does as he does in other places. So we have to understand the Rambam, and the Rebbe is going to be medayik, is going to show us the precision of the Rambam's words, which is going to lead us to understand what the Rambam is saying, and based on that, the Rebbe is going to explain to us the Rambam's shit. We have to first focus on the actual words of the Rambam. But Nagia to the Dalit cases passing the Rambam, when it comes to the 4 kaisos, the Rambam says, every one of these kaisos, you make its own bracha. You make ha'agafen again and again. He also tells us what is said over, what is recited over these Dalit cases. It will be mentioned later on in the Sikha, but the first case is for Kiddush, the second case is for Haggadah, for Magid, the third case is benching, and the 4th case is Halal. So first he talks about the Dalit cases, he talks about them in general, that they have to, each one gets their own bracha, and what is said over each one. But then when it comes to the order of the night, is it mefared by yedin kais as eri shoy, so the Rambam specifies that you drink the cup. From kais rishim, by the first kais, mevarach beiri pri hagafen ve'emer lav kiddush yem uzman v'shoysa, you make a hagafen, you make kiddush, you say asher achiyanu, and you drink. From kais sheni, umevarach beiri pri hagafen v'shoysa kais hasheni, that after magid, you make a hagafen, and you drink the second cup. Because you bench over the 3rd kais, and then you drink it. You make a hagafen, and you don't drink anything else after this, meaning this you drink. It doesn't say clearly the word v'sheisayu, but it's very clearly implied that you drink the fourth kais, and after that you don't drink anything. So when it comes to the four kaises, the Rambam was very clear that these kaises should be consumed. When it comes to the fifth cup, the Rambam says that you should pour a fifth cup and you should say halal over it. And he does not conclude that you should make a agafen and drink. As we know, the Rambam is so precise in his words. Is therefore move on. That the Rambam is teaching us, is pointing this specifically out. We do not drink the fifth cup, and we pour it, we recite halal, but we don't drink it. And this is actually understood from the Rambam's words, because earlier the Rambam said that you pour a fourth cup, you complete the halal which you started at the end of Magid. You make a bracha of agafen. And after drinking the fourth kais, you don't drink anything else besides for water. And the Rambam is not going to immediately contradict himself. As we think that that we're going to drink a fifth cup after the fourth cup. The Rambam just said that you don't drink anything after the fourth cup besides for water. So clearly there's no fifth cup to be consumed. In that case, what's the deal with the fifth cup? Maizik. You pour it, you fill it up, you recite the halal gadol, and you don't drink it. The question is, what is the significance of this? That's what the Rebbe is going to explain now in Sif Gimel Sif Daled. The Rebbe is going to give us two explanations. Why is the Rambam Shita? What is the point of this? To pour a cup, to recite the halal gadol over it, and to not drink it. So the beer is as follows. The Rambam learned the days was an mefarish as a tarfin is mechuluk medazatana didan. The Rambam is learning, the Rambam is following the opinions that say that there's a machlekes, there's a dispute between Reb Tarfin and our Tana, the Tana that we follow. Simi is mechuyev in our cases, the Chamisha cases is the obligation to drink 4 cups or 5 cups. Meaning to say our Tana says 4 cups, which is what we do. Reb Tarfin says you drink 5 cups. Well, the fiza daf l'cheda is coming as halacha gedas Tana didan. It would be understood that the halacha would follow our Tana, which is the Chachamim, which is the majority, and that you only have 4 cases. But we find the Gemara discussing, according to the Tarfim, what are we going to recite over the 5th cup? Where does halal gadol begin? Which implies that Reb Tarfin's opinion does have validity in halacha. Otherwise, why would they discuss it? So now we're stuck. On the one hand, we have the Tana that says 4 cases. On the other hand, you have Reb Tarfin that says 5 cases, which there is an implication from the Gemara that this is the halacha as well. So one might say, let's go more stringent and let's just drink a 5th cup. You can't say, I'll just drink another cup and be safe. Because of the opinion that says 4 cups, says 4 cups and not 5 cups. They say you're not allowed to drink anything after the 4th cup. The Rambam says clearly that after the 4th case, you don't drink anything besides for water. So what am I supposed to do? The Rambam has to tell us what to do. On the one hand, there's an opinion in the Gemara that you drink 5. On the other hand, there's an opinion in the Gemara that you drink 4. The one that says 4 says 4, not 5. The one that says 5, not 4. What are you supposed to do? Is the Rambam machrias? Therefore, the Rambam resolves it in the following way: let's pour the cup, let's fill up the cup, but let's not drink it. And you have 2 gains. On the one hand, drinking, you're only drinking 4 cups, like Tana Didan. But at the same time, we're filling up a 5th cup to fulfill the opinion of Reb Tarfin. If the opinion of Reb Tarfin is to drink the 5th cup, then what are we gaining by filling it up and not drinking it? So the Rebbe says we find another example in halacha where we do something like this: mizigas kais v'amira lovim and trinktim, where we fill up the cup, we recite something over it, but we don't drink it. What will be this example? Su'udah b'erev Shabbos. A person started a meal on erev Shabbos. Gets taken in Shabbos, which continued into Shabbos. So you do bench, and the benching is over a cup of wine. Even though you can't drink this cup right now. Sorry, 1 second. Let's just make sure we understand that. A person, Shabbos started, you're benching on the Suda that started before Shabbos, you're benching on a kois, but you can't drink the kois because you didn't make Kiddush. And even after you make Kiddush, you don't make Kiddush on this kois. Like by Abdullah, you can do that. The Rambam says clearly that if this was the case, you would have to make a Kiddush on a separate kois. So you see that there's a concept of eating, of reciting words over a cup of wine, even though the cup will not be consumed. And the same thing could be applied to these cups that are being consumed that on the night of Pesach. And generally speaking, in the cups of Pesach, there's two different things, two elements. Aleph, there's tiyas hakaises. Number one, the drinking of the kais. Beis, das, was die Chachamim misaken gewinnt zu sagen auf jeden von den 4 cases. The recitations that are made over the cups of wine. It's two different things. In other words, there's a concept of Amira without Shasiya, and there's a concept of Shasiya. There's reciting words, and then there's drinking. When the fire paskin, the Rambam begin case Chamisha Daf amazing exam case for Lemer Olav Halal Agadol for the Rambam paskins. You should fill up the cup and not drink it. You can't drink it because you're not allowed to drink more than 4. So at least the part of the reciting we should fulfill the opinion of Reb Tarfon, and as Rabbi explained, there is something about filling up the cup and saying something which is better than not doing that at all. That was one approach. Veidish Leimar says the Rebbe. There's another way of understanding the Rambam. Till now, in Sif Gimel, the Rebbe explained that the Rab Tarfon is arguing with the Chachamim, and since we don't know who to follow, we sort of compromise. Compromise is not the right word, but we do both. We drink 4 kaises and we pour 5 kaises. We could say it in another way. The Rambam learned the Kama first was Tarfon is not mechulik with das Kama. As the mitzvah to drinking is not of valid cases. The Rambam learns as other commentaries that the Tarfon is not arguing with the Tanakama. Under Pshat and Divrei Tarfon legir sasei chamishi emer olav halal agadol is as a darf blois meizig sein dem kais for lemer olav halal agadol leben nit drinken. That the Tarfon himself holds to only drink the 4 kaises, only drink the 4 kaises, and the 5th kais should be poured, filled, but not consumed. This is, in other words, previously we said that this was the Rambam's compromise. Now the Rebbe is teaching another pshat, that the Rebbe Tarfon himself, this is what he holds. And the Rambam is following the opinion of Rebbe Tarfon that you should fill up the cup and say halal agadol and not to drink it. And what's the reason? What's the explanation? The kais chamishi is getelled from the andere 4 cases. In the Geder Kiyum a mitzvah and avad in the Mechina Chavtasol mitzvah. That the 5th cup, according to the Tarfon, is different than the 4 cups, both in how to fulfill the mitzvah and also in the mitzvah in and of itself. Like in the 4 cases, with regards to the 4 cups, the Rambam, the Gemara says that Chachamim established to drink 4 cups in the manner of freedom. Each one is you do a mitzvah with it. As the Rambam says, that every kais of the 4 kaises you make a bracha for itself. The first kais you make kiddush on it. The second kais you read the Haggadah, the story of Yitzias Mitzrayim Magid. In the 4th kais you bench over it. You say you grace after meals. The 4th kais you complete halal which you started in the end of Magid, and you say Birchas Hashir, which is Az Yashir, Nishmas, Nishmas and Yishtabach. Das heißt, which means to say that even though each one of the 4 cases is its own mitzvah, is its own expression of freedom, there is a common theme amongst the 4. Number 1, that each of the 4 is consumed for the purpose of freedom. Every single one of them has a mitzvah, has its own mitzvah and its own bracha. Mashenke, the case Chamishi is not in the Megillah from Kiyum mitzvahs Dalet cases, but the case Chamishi is an entirely different thing. The Mekay say is when Aleph Nitchais, number one, we don't drink it, even though the other 4 cases we do drink. Beis the Amira of Nit Besuga Amira of the Dalet cases. What is recited over the 4th cases does not go into the same category as the other 4, because Ladas Rambam has been the Amira of Case Chamishi Nitchesim Bebracha. Because according to the Rambam, the Halal Gadol is not, which is being recited over the 5th cup, is not concluded with a bracha. Second, the Amira of the Dalet cases, whereas the other 4 cases, each one ends with a bracha. A Kiddush is the bracha of Shechiyanu, and the second case is the bracha of Asher Galon of Agalas of Isenu. The third case is the bracha of benching, and the 4th case is Yishtabach. If you're not ending with a bracha, what is the significance of the halal of the Kais Chamishi? The Kais Chamishi was a zakta duf halal gadol von Hedel Hashem kitev al naris bavel is a halal of veidah of kolos dal the Kais Shekim mitzvasam. It's a thank you, it's a gratitude to Hashem on the mitzvah of the Dalet cases. Or to see it more zoomed out, that we're thanking Hashem for all the mitzvahs that we did this night, and all the various different rituals and that were done this night. We're not going to go into exactly what is the significance of this halal gadol, but the point is that it's something different and unique from the other 4 cases. So therefore, it has a different din. That the 4 cases you have to drink it. The 5th case you don't drink it. The 4th case each one has a bracha b'fnei atzma. The 5th case there's no bracha b'fnei atzma. The other 4 cases, everything you end with a bracha. Here you don't end with a bracha because it's a different mitzvah. It's not just you're being done differently. The chavtza of the mitzvah is different. We're doing something else. Here, the other Dalet cases is in Yav Chedus. The 5th case, I'm sorry, is not in Yishal Chedus. It's a halal veidah for the other cases. And this, now we can understand the words of the Rambam. That a person should pour a 5th kais. And he doesn't say the words mitzvah and amufchar. Why? The term mitzvah and amufchar implies that you're enhancing the perfection of this mitzvah. Nochmer, das meint nicht nur Eisaf as Mufcher in Kiyam mitzvah de Agavre, nor mitzvah ben Mufcher de Meile ben Mufcher is in the Chafetz mitzvah. Not only the person is extending himself, the whole mitzvah is being done in a better way. And a very apropos example is the words of the Rambam by Chanukah Licht. The Rambam writes, the basic mitzvah of Chanukah is that every house should have 1 candle each night. Someone wants to do nicer, everybody in the house should have their own candle. But someone wants to do it even more beautiful and do a mitzvah min hamufchar, madlik ner l'kolechad b'layla harishin. Every person in the house will light 1 candle on the first night, and every night adds another candle. Was der hier dorten is an uftim is eine Chanukah gufa. In der Chefte there is Chanukah kemavur b'mochamacher. The Rabbi discussed this in another place. That it's not just that the person is doing more. The whole mitzvah is different. There's a different amount of candles, not just different amount of candles. The concept of Moshe v'Heilich is so different than the concept of lighting a candle. The whole mitzias of the mitzvah is being done differently. Similarly over here, when we talk, if he would use the word mitzvah min hamufchar, it would mean that you're taking the mitzvah of the Dalet kaises and you're enhancing it. We bow this l'shittas the Rambam is their kais chamishi. Nit in them gather from mitzvahs Dalet kaises, since according to the Rambam, the kais chamishi is not the same category as the 4 cases. Is nechayach to zagen as the kais is min hamufchar in mitzvah Dalet kaises. You can't say that the 5th cup is an enhancement of the mitzvah of the 4, because it's a totally different mitzvah. Totally different concept. When the Father said the Rambam v'yeshlim zekes chamishi al sabazunda tzivi v'chiyuv, and on the lashon v'yeshlim, therefore the Rambam used the word v'yeshlim to say that he should do this. There's a whole other idea, a whole other mitzvah that that a person should do that is in addition to the mitzvah of Dalet cases, which is a separate mitzvah. That's why the Rambam says these words. This kais is not an obligation like the other 4 cases, and is madgish as the kais chamishi is nit chayva with the other cases. No meant the yeshle canal. He's emphasizing that it's a different kind of obligation. The Dalet cases is a real chayva, and this case is of a yeshle. It's something that he should do. but it's very different. If it was mitzvah min hamufchar, then it was part of the daled kaises, then it would be kumay arba kaises. Even if it's a mitzvah min hamufchar, it would still be in the same world as the 4 kaises. By saying einay kumay arba kaises, the Rambam is emphasizing that it's a separate concept, and this is so these are the 2 different ways to understand the Rambam. The Rambam holds all the ways to understand the Rambam that one should not drink the kais chamishi. And the question is it a hachra that we're doing because we don't know what to do, so therefore we pour it and we fill it and we don't drink it, or is this the shita of Reb Tarfon that the 5th kais is a separate gather, it's a separate category, and what we do over it is only the meziga and the amira, the filling the cup and the recitation that's done over the cup, which is, and not the shasiyah, that's not part of this mitzvah, as we find in other places that there is a concept of amira ala kais, where we say something over the kais, even though we're not drinking the kais. In Sivav, the Rebbe is going to introduce this possibility that what we do today, the kais shel Eliyahu, is actually related to this kais chamishi, and ultimately the Rebbe is going to conclude that it's 2 totally different things, as we see in the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch. So there's an approach that says, the Rebbe mentions Sefer Tamei Amin Hagim, that says that what we do today, the kais chamishi that we fill up before benching, we fill up a kais chamishi, we open the door later for Eliyahu Hanavi, that is connected with the same concept as the kais chamishi that we've been discussing till now. Since there is a machlokes in Gemara whether you need the kais chamishi or not, and the halacha was not finalized, therefore machmas safek is men moizik dem kais chamishi mitrim tinit. And therefore, what we do by our Seder is, because we are in doubt of what we're supposed to do, we fill up the cup, but we don't drink it. And this is why we refer to it as Eliyahu Hanavi's cup. Intending to say, as when Eliyahu vet kumen, when Eliyahu comes and resolves all of the doubts, but there's suffix that in them kaisness bar, and he'll resolve this doubt as well if we're obligated to drink a fifth kais or not. So this would sound very beautiful. That similar to the Rambam, what we said earlier, that since we don't know what to do, we do both. We fill up the cup, but we don't drink it, and we actually do something similar to that. We don't actually say the whole halal hagadol. We do something similar to that at our Seder. However, the Rebbe says from Chag Yankiv und dem alten Rebbe Shulchan Aruch is aber muchach hat das ein Zweibas und den Yonim. So even though they seem similar to what we explained earlier with regards to the Kais Chamishi, it's clear from the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch and from the Chag Yaakov that actually the Kais Chamishi that we were talking about till now and the Kais Shel Eliyahu are actually 2 separate ideas. And the Rebbe explains how we get to that conclusion. The Alter Rebbe brings us ein Shulchan Aruch dem Sakar Ramah. The Alter Rebbe in Simin Tov Pei Aleph in Shulchan Aruch brings the following psak of the Ramah. The minig, the accepted custom is to not drink any wine after the 4 cases. Unless a person is very thirsty or another a reason of urgency that he must drink. So if he has other things to drink, he should drink a different drink. But if there's no lak yayin, if the only thing he has to drink is wine and it's an urgency, we could allow him to drink a 5th kais, to say until the end. So the Alter Rebbe is saying is that the custom is to not drink anything after the 4th kais, unless in the case of an emergency and the only thing that's left is wine, then he could say halal hagadol over it and drink another kais. That's in Tov Pei Aleph. In a Friediken Simen and Simen Tov Pei, sagt der Alter Rebbe fun Chag Yaakov, the Alter Rebbe says, it is a custom in these countries, limzoi kais ach echad yoser meyamesubin, to drink what to pour 1 cup more than of all the people gathered. For example, if you have a seder with 10 people, each one has their own kais, to then do one more, an 11th kais. The kaidinoi say kais shel Eliyahu Hanavi, and we refer to it as the cup of Eliyahu Hanavi. From them is move on from the way you see the Alter Rebbe introducing these two ideas. You will see design and svebas under the Gamri that we're talking about two totally different things. So much so that the Rebbe points out 3 differences. Aleph, as sie stehen, seinen voneinander getilten svebas under the Siman, they are written and separated into 2 separate simanim. If they were the same thing, then the Alter Rebbe would put it together, one sif after the next, or in the same sif. The fact that it's on 2 totally separate simanim is already a proof that we're talking about 2 different things. Beis, sie werden angerufen mit andere Shemes. They are referred to by different names. In Siman Tav Pei, he calls it Kais Shel Eliyahu. In Siman Tav Pei Aleph, he calls it Kais Chamishi. Und sie haben sich pratim v'dinim shaynim zeh. And they have different dinim. This is Kais Chamishi of a matter given lemisha tzarich. Und dem will therefore sagen alav halal agadol. The 5th cup that we were talking about is only in the case of an emergency, and even then he has to say halal agadol over it. The Kais Shel Eliyahu is a widespread custom and not a leniency, not something that's done only in the case of an emergency. So they have different names and different dinim. Gimel chiluk hachi gadol, and the most major difference is meizig nar kais echad yoser me'amisubin. By the Kais Shel Eliyahu, it's just 1 cup more than everyone else. V'shayach l'seder kol ha'misubin, and that 1 cup is for everyone. Nitken kais lekol echad, not 1 for each person. Mashenken the kais chamishi was matmatigen zu jeden einen v'chadafter zu ankommen. Whereas the kais chamishi was allowed for every person that needs it. So if there's 6 people by the table that need to drink, 6 people would drink it, would pour a kais chamishi and say halal gadol over it. So it's a totally different thing. So you have 3 things. First of all, there are 2 different simanim. Second of all, they have different names and have different dinim. And third of all, you're doing by the kais shel Eliyahu, you're doing 1 kais for everyone. And from this we could apply the same thing to the Rambam. Just like by the Alter Rebbe, we see clearly that it's 2 separate things. So too we can say with regards to the Shita of the Rambam, was halt genau as is needs tamaheter other rishus nor v'yesh leichiyuv, which, as we explained in the Rambam, it's not just a heter that you're allowed to do so, but rather it's something that you're supposed to do. Adas is nita chiyuv von ein kais for alle misubin. That the Rambam doesn't mean that it's like a kais shel Eliyahu, that it's 1 cup for everyone. Not a kais for kol echad, what says mekayim, it says daot kaises. In the kais chamishi would be something, according to the Rambam, that every person that's doing the 4 kaises should also have another kais. Ukediuk l'shayne yash loy limzay. He, the person, anybody who's doing a seder, should pour for himself. Afilunit yash limzay stam kais chamishi doesn't even say the word it should be poured, but each individual person should pour the cup. So therefore the Rambam Shita is that this is not the Kais Shel Eliyahu that we are accustomed to. Rather, it's a separate thing that applies to every single person. And the Rambam Shita is whoever's making a seder and whoever's drinking the 4 kaises should pour a 5th kais, say halal gadol over it, but not drink the actual kais, either because we don't know what the halacha is, or because this is what Reb Tarfon holds, that it's meant to be poured and not to be consumed. Zayin abir b'derech b'pnimi so'inyan. Sif Zayin, the Rebbe is going to begin to take us more on a deeper level, and the Rebbe is going to explain 2 points. Aleph, was a case chamishi un cases shel Eliyahu seinen zwei besondere Sachen binyanem v'dinem kanal. What is the difference? Why are we saying that they're 2 separate things? Und nachmer mi gefindt in zeh in yanim hafachim. We find actually 2 opposite points when you compare the Kais Shel Eliyahu and the Kais Chamishi. The Kais Chamishi paskin der Rambam, v'yesh le'limzeh Kais Chamishi, aber lepayil is men sich nit neig azeh. When it comes to the Kais Chamishi, the Rambam says to do it. It was discussed in the Gemara, it's discussed in the Rishonim, and the Rambam says to do it, and in the end, it doesn't get done. In Shulchan Aruch is the Pesach halacha, as says nor aheter leistanis or the ratoiv lishtais. In Shulchan Aruch, it says the only time you could do the Kais Chamishi is only in the case of an emergency, or in a case of urgency. So the Kais Chamishi, the Rambam says to do it, and yet we don't do it unless in case of emergency. We see the exact opposite. It's not mentioned in the earlier sources or in the Gemara. And this is the one that became a widespread custom. So the Kois Chamishi, which originates in the Gemara, has not become something that's accepted at most as Darim. And the Kois of Eliyahu that's not mentioned in the Gemara or even in the Rishonim became a widespread custom. So the Rebbe is going to explain this. Number two, why B'chalal are they two separate things? What's the difference between them? And number two, how did this phenomenon evolve that which was mentioned in the Gemara became almost non-existent, and that which is non-existent in the Gemara became widespread in our days? Men gefindt dat Zadashava in die zwei cases, was the Fianalman trinkt sie nicht. Both the Kois Chamishi and the Kois Sheliyo have a similarity in the fact, a comparison in the fact that they are not consumed. They're poured but not consumed. Was der Fun ist verstandig, als beide seine verbunden mit der Avedu Madrege, welcher ist Hecher von Avedu bemeisel Peil b'Shasiya. On a more mystical level, the fact that we're not drinking it means that it represents something that's beyond higher. It transcends the person's actions. There's certain things that are affected by the person's actions. Here, the person is not drinking it, which means that we're talking about an Aveda and a way of serving Hashem that transcends the person's Aveda. Und das ist der Pirush Pnimi, in dem was der Rambam is Messiah, and this would be the deeper meaning of the words of the Rambam, that this kais is not an obligation like the other four kaises. Das ist verbunden mit der Madrege, welcher ist Hecher von Chayva. It connects with a level that's higher than obligation. As it's explained in Chassidus about the davening of Ma'ariv, that it was established as something that was optional. So Chassidus explains that it actually is a higher level, and a higher level that we can't we can't impose on the person to do it. We have to allow him to do it because something that is imposed, it means that he could reach whatever is accomplished by what he's doing. But something that is a higher level, not everyone could reach it, and therefore we can't impose it on the person. We could only make it into an option. Similarly, with regards to the Arba Kaises, the Arba Kaises are actually something that is an obligation on the person, which means it's part of the person's Maisa, is action, and therefore it reaches only up to a certain level. Whereas the fifth kais is something that is not there's no Maisa involved in it, say we don't drink it, implying that it reaches the higher level. Similarly, with regards to the case of Leo, this is really the fifth cup. Again, at this point, we're still talking about we're still comparing the two. In both cases, they are either a kais chamisha, you don't drink it because it's higher than avodah, or a kais Leo, which is connected to the geula. Again, the geula is a time and it is a phenomenon that transcends the person's avodah. Of course, our avodah brings the geula, but ultimately, what happens at the geula is something that transcends way beyond our avodah. So, on the one hand, there's something that compares the two, the fact that they both transcend the person's avodah. But there is still a difference. By calling it the fifth cup, the fifth is part of a sequence. So it represents that it still has a connection to the previous four. It's the fifth in the sequence of coming after the four. Whereas the Kais Elio is not called the fifth cup, it's called a cup of Elio. It's a separate thing that is totally removed from the previous avodah. In other words, even though both Kais Chamishi, Kais Elio transcend the person's avodah, but the Kais Chamishi, though it transcends, it still is related to the avodah that came before the four Kaises, whereas Kais Elio, it transcends it entirely. What does this mean? The Rabbi explains. The fifth cup comes only after the person completed the previous avodah. Und derach am Bewur wegen der Ressource der Leila HaGimel, was vernimshach davke noch dem, wie der Adam great zu an Asar Shlim. As it's explained in Chassidus, that there's a third level of Ressource de Leila. There's one level of Ressource de Leila that is triggered by the Ressource de Tata. There's one Ressource de Leila that is higher than that. And there's a Ressource that is even higher than that, but it only is drawn down into this world once the person prepares a place for it, which means that even though it's a very high awakening from above, nevertheless, it only comes down, it's only drawn down once the person has prepared himself for it. And this is why the fifth cup is mentioned in the Gemara and in the era of the Geonim, and even in the Rambam, which is the era of the Rishonim. Which at that time there were those whose custom it was to actually pour for themselves a fifth cup, which means they were actually performing the avodah, this lofty avodah that could lead to the fifth cup. Their avodah was compared to angels. Which means that later on the generations became weaker, but in that time the generations were stronger spiritually, and therefore they were able through their avodah to reach a higher level. The Leila Seder ubishtias dalet kaises is given in an acharefen ubishleimus. They were able to perform on the night of the Seder to drink the 4 kaises on a higher level. And therefore their avodah was able to prepare the ground to draw down this higher level, the kais chamishi. But in our times, which is the footsteps of Mashiach, the very, very end of Galus, which the Deiris are weaker spiritually, and therefore we can't really expect that our Avodah should be able to reach Asar Shlim, that we should have prepared the ground to draw down this higher level. Therefore, is Kais Chamishin Neg B'Derisenu. That's why we don't do Kais Chamishi today, because our Aveda doesn't lead to it. As we explained earlier, Kais Chamishi is connected to the previous 4 cases. So in the time of the Gemara and the Gemara and the Rishonim, they were on a higher level. They could do 4 cases in a way that could lead and prepare the ground for a Kais Chamishi, and therefore they would do Kais Chamishi and bring down this higher energy. Whereas today we are not able to do so, and therefore we don't drink the Kais Chamishi because we can't draw down the energy that the Kais Chamishi is meant to draw down. Aber on the other side, the Kais of Elio is connected with the faith of Jewish people in the coming of Elio and Avi and Moshiach. As it's understood from the flow in the words of the Alter Rebbe, that this custom of having a Keshel Yozok, that Alter Rebbe the Alter Rebbe brings it as a continuation to what he wrote in the beginning of the Sif. What did Alter Rebbe write? That there are certain places that have a custom to not lock the doors where people are sleeping on the night of Pesach. It's a night of protection for all the Yidden in all generations, that Hashem should take us out of Galus. And if Elio comes to herald the Geula, he'll find the door unlocked. And we can very quickly and easily go to greet him. And this is what we believe in. This faith has a great reward. And then the Alter Rebbe says, we have a custom in these countries to pour a kosher Elio. But the fun is moving to Pashtas that says kosher v'shayich, so that emunah and the regula asida. So therefore we see the connection that this emunah that we have to keep our doors unlocked and the kosher Elio are connected with each other, because the kosher Elio is connected with our emunah and the gula. Was the emunah is da by jeden. Kais Chamishi, we were saying you have to reach a high level of Avodah that was applicable to people that were Rishonim Kimalachim, that were on a high level like the angels. But the Amunah, the faith in the coming of Mashiach, is by every single Yid, all of whom are believers, the children of believers. Regardless of what his Avodah looks like on the external level, is by him this Yid, who externally his avodah might seem lacking, but his emunah in Mashiach is strong, certainly even in a revealed way, and certainly in the depth of his soul. Not only to believe in Mashiach, but to await the coming of Mashiach. Which believing in Mashiach and waiting for Mashiach are a commandment. So every single Yid is holding there. The deeper we find, the closer we are to the end of Galus, closer to the Geula, als mehr und stärker das mehr bei Eden, this faith in the coming of Mashiach and in the waiting for Mashiach, it shines ever brighter and ever stronger. Und der Riber ist dafke bederes achreinim nisgalu und ispashe geworden der minik von limze case echad yeser mesuben v'koyer neise koshel yohanavi, and it's specifically in these final generations where this custom became revealed and became widespread that we should pour a kais for Eliyahu Hanavi. Although we don't find it in the earlier generations, because we're talking about a time where the Emunah in Mashiach is so strong, and the Kais Shel Eliyahu represents the Emunah in Mashiach. When das is Aleph Kais Echad, number one, it is one cup for everyone. Beis, that is Yoiser Mikol Miklolos HaMesubin, it's one, the number of it, it's higher than however many people you have. If you have 10 people at the table, this is the 11th one. And the Rebbe is going to explain these 2 points in the next 2 paragraphs. What does it mean when the Alter Rebbe says 1 cup more than the number of people at the table? The Mitzvah the Alter Rebbe meramis as Eliyahu Hanavi kommt und wird einer von den Mesubim besuchen das Seder. One more than the people sitting at the Seder, because Eliyahu becomes a participant at the Seder. The Emunah of Yidden, which on this night, the night that Hashem revealed Himself in Mitzrayim, and we actually express that Emunah in an open way by filling up a cup with wine. That is what brings the Navi to the Seder. On the one hand, he's one person more than all of the Mesubin, which means to say he's bringing in something that wasn't there yet. Aber beyachad im zeh steht sein Kais zusammen auf denselben Schuchen mit Kais Mesubin, echad min ha-Mesubin, but at the same time it's one cup that represents everybody. Eliyahu Hanavi is coming from a very high place, but he's coming to this Seder to become one with everybody at the Seder. So what we see from over here is the comparison between the Kais Chamishi and Kais Eliyahu is the fact that they're higher than Avodah. They transcend the Avodah. But Kais Chamishi is still connected to the Avodah. It's still doable in Avodah, and therefore in the eras of Rishayim Kimalachim, they would have Kais Chamishi. And it's just that today we can't do it because we're not on that level. On the other hand, Emunah in Mashiach, that is something that every Yid has, and therefore Kais Shel Eliyahu began now in Nikas of the Mashiach when the faith of Yidden became so much more powerful than it was in the past. And what happens is, the way the Alter Rebbe writes in the Shulchan Aruch, the Eliyahu, we through our avodah of waiting for Mashiach and believing in Mashiach, we bring Eliyahu to our Seder, and Eliyahu, we fill up a cup for him that unites everyone with Eliyahu Hanavi, and that is the higher avodah that we reach through the Kais Shel Eliyahu, through the Emunah in Mashiach, and through the waiting for the coming of Mashiach.